We're back with another Valspar color review, and today's episode is about Dusk in the Valley. This is a color that was requested by one of my Patreon members. Thank you so much for your support. And what's awesome about it is it's a new take on gray. It's not the boring gray from the past. There's a little more to it. In fact, you could argue it's more of a rouge or a rougey gray. So let's talk about it. I'm gonna give you some details on Dusk in the Valley by Valspar, and I'm gonna give you some trim and color pairings that go really well with it. Because I'm James, the color guy. This is Color Quickie. Let's quickly get into it. So one of the first things that I like to talk about when I'm talking about a paint color is its LRV. And when you go on the Valspar website or any major paint company website, they should tell you what the light reflectance value is. Essentially, it's a percentage from 0 to 100 telling you how light a color appears based on the amount of light that it reflects. Sounds complicated, but the higher that number is, the lighter it'll appear in person. So Dusk in the Valley has a 62 LRV, which is in a good spot. If you're a fan of the channel, if you're a subscriber or a Patreon member, then you know any color in the low 60s kind of sits in a nice sweet spot for wall colors inside your home, because it's kind of a not too hot, not too cold situation, but instead it's a not too dark, not too light situation. The problem with lighter colors is they can feel washed out when there's a ton of light in your space, and darker colors can just feel too dark. So if you want a room to feel a little more airy and open, those lighter colors will help keep the light reflected back into the space. So Dusk in the Valley kind of does both at the same time. It's just a nice place to be in terms of a main color in your home. And I could see Dusk in the Valley being that main anchoring color in your hallway, in the main parts of your home. Even if you wanted to paint your whole home inside with this paint color, might feel a bit kind of monotonous, but you could do it because it does feel pretty versatile as a paint color. That being said, it does tend to lean towards the cool side of things, which is not necessarily advantageous. If you have warmer hardwood flooring, let's say, it might be overly accentuated by a cooler gray on the walls. But at the same time, maybe you don't want to double down on that warmth and you want a wall color that can help cool the space a bit more, which this color could do. Now, I did mention you could define it as a rouge, which is like my made-up term for those sort of red, taupey kind of gray colors. And that's because of all the undertones that are present, there is a touch of red here that brings in this almost taupe-like feel. So kind of a browny gray coloration. This can sometimes translate to a purple undertone in person, especially with interior lighting based on my experience. So just be aware of that. It is a little bit of a volatile neutral, which means it can look gray in some cases and violet in others. So just be aware of that, and please test your colors out before committing. Now, because this is such a great color, you want to make sure that you're picking the right trim color for it as well. So your baseboards and your frames and your doors, what colors go well with it? I have two options. The first one is ultra white, and essentially it is a pure, bright, crisp white, very stark. Basically, it's free of undertones, so it's going to give you the brightest look possible pretty much. It'll very much pop against nearly any color you throw at it, so your trim is going to look brand new, sparkling, and clean. That being said, if you wanted something a bit darker, so you have contrast on the other side of things, Cadet Gray would be a great choice as a darker trim color, because the undertones live in that same world as Dusk in the Valley. You do have that gray base with that little bit of red, brown, kind of a taupe feeling to it. Although I would say because Cadet Gray has more saturation to it, it has more colorant in it, those undertones become a little more noticeable and prominent. Dare I say they lean even more towards the cool side of things. So you get this stone effect, this like earthiness, very grounded, but just pairs perfectly with Dusk in the Valley. Now, in terms of wall color pairings, if you want a little more variety and you're not just going with one color throughout your home, I have three options for you. The first one is Bistro White, and this is a choice that sits in between that ultra white trim color and Dusk in the Valley. It's still quite bright, but it's as bright as you can go on your walls without having your trim color look the same. So there's still going to be a noticeable contrast between the two if you use them in conjunction, but I wanted to offer Bistro White as another choice for walls if you didn't want something that had that grayed out effect that Dusk in the Valley has. Maybe you wanted certain rooms to feel even brighter and more lively, and that's what this color will do. Just be sure to maybe give it a third coat, because white's the this bright can be a bit finicky to apply properly. But if you hired a painter, that's their problem, right? Story of my life. 4 coats sometimes with these bright whites. Now our second color brings in a little more saturation and a different color hue. So we're stepping away from that browny, reddy, purpley vibe, and we're going with Spearmint Haze, which as you can see is more of the greens. And what I love about this color is it has kind of this cool spearmint or peppermint. I forget which one is green, but there's almost like this jade green that feels a little cool and minty and fresh. Maybe a slight pistachio gelato type of vibe. I don't know. It feels fresh and lively, but it has some richness to it. It's not a pastel color by any means, and it sits around a 42/43 LRV mark, which is fairly deep for a mid-tone. So this is a paint color that I would maybe use sparingly because of its level of saturation. So you could use it as an accent room color throughout a whole room. You could have it in accent form off of the walls with furniture and textiles and throw pillows and accessories essentially. But I could see it working great in a powder room, for example, where you want a bit of a showy color. The third color pairing is on the darker side of things, but it's actually not as punchy as that last green color we talked about, but it does have that darkness, which can give it some limitations, I would say. But when used in the right space, it's going to be beautiful. It's called Window Screen, and this color at its core is part of the purple family, kind of like Dusk in the Valley, but instead of a reddy brown taupe coloration, this one feels to me like a slate gray, purple blue, like an indigo. That is very much in line with some of the colors of the year we've been seeing from other companies, namely Blue Nova by Benjamin Moore. Although this one is more shaded, it's a little more grounded, ultimately a bit more muted visually. And I think that's why this is a color that, even though it's the darkest of the 3 colors we talked about, it's not going to feel as vibrant or punchy. So you might be able to get away with it in more spaces like offices and a dining room. So those secondary rooms that aren't completely closed off, that are maybe part of your first floor if you have multiple stories, there might be even more use cases for it compared to Spearmint Haze, although that color is a little more fun in my opinion. So here's the color palette altogether. Please let me know what you think of this one. If you want even more content from us and you want to support us even more than just subscribing and liking the video, you can become a Patreon and get new content every single Sunday. You can even request your own personal mini color quickie there. More details in the description down below. As for YouTube videos, we have another one right over here just for you.